What's going on, YouTube? So today we got a deck profile of football player, something I wasn't expecting to build, but I managed to pick this up for about 70 bucks.
Football
So,
slash rugby slash murder.
yeah, they kill each other on the field, so you can't really complain. Without further ado, we can just get into the profile. So I'll
why
start
are
off.
you starting Mecha Trainer?
Oh, yeah, this is Mecha Trainer. It's the only thing you can start with. Standard
Okay.
draw card. Unless if you want to use a trigger to start, I mean, you can. I wouldn't recommend
you
it.
technically can use that unflip thing.
Yeah, but then
Like,
again,
at this point in Standard, there are legitimately, even in the Japanese format, there's only two possible cards outside of the just ride and draw that can actually work as starters.
yeah, but even then you wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah, even then, they're both bad.
Yep. So, we started off with 8 crits. I guess this is something I do kind of have to explain since a lot of profiles in Japan run 6 draws, but this deck does a really good job of just thinning itself out of normal units, and oftentimes you reach such big numbers, and they usually PG the Siegfried anyways, that having your...
It also doesn't have as much, like, slip in hand to call as you did in G-Series.
Yeah, so, except for, like, Gyro Slinger, top spoiler, I run that card, but having the crit, I think, on your, like, 50k rearguard when they're on grade 2 is pretty good. So I just run 8 crits because, you know, catches a lot of people off guard, and I think the deck really does benefit from it. Or draw PGs, because I don't, sometimes I just like to be able to say your attack can't hit. And 4 heals, because I like healing.
Always good.
So on to the grade 1s, we've got 4 copies of Gyro Slinger. This card's pretty good for setting up your board. It doesn't require Counterblast, which is pretty useful since Siegfried's usually sucking a lot of it up. The only thing I don't like is that it technically takes a card from your hand, but eh. If you don't know what this card does, you put a card from your hand into the soul, and you can look at the top card of your deck to the same amount as your Vanguard. You can call that card, and it gains 5k, so good. Again, it's really nice for setting up your board. If you go second, you could ride this card and potentially do a grade 1 rush, but I usually don't, but it is an option that exists. It's really good in grade 2 turns, so...
It is also a net neutral, unlike past Spike Brothers, where you would always be calling and then putting back.
Yeah, and that's one thing actually to note about Spike Brothers, is that compared to Royals, a lot of people compare to Royals in that they do a lot of the same thing as Superior Calling from deck, but Royals actually +1 a lot more than this deck. But this deck does reach a lot better numbers and is better at just toolboxing a lot of the units, so you're not restricted to like Blaster Blade or Pongle, but you can really call any card from the deck, really. Next card is we run 4 copies of Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy is really good for putting triggers back into your deck, and it's also just really good that he can filter himself at the beginning of your main phase to call another Wonder Boy out.
This is something I have noticed about this deck, is that you can sort of... They do have a serious tempo issue in that once they run out of their copies of stuff that they have to recall, they kind of lose a lot of steam.
Yeah, and that's what this card helps do, is it helps put those pieces back into the deck too. One thing you do have to notice that when you're playing this deck, before you use Siegfried skill, please check your drop zone and your damage zone and your soul.
Otherwise you waste a card.
Yeah, I mean, he still gets to 10k, but, like, I've seen too many people whiff. But we run this card because it's really good utility, I think, for the deck, and much needed. Next, we've got one of my favorite grade 1s. 4 copies of Commander Gary Cannon. This card's quite simple. When an attack boost hits the Vanguard, you can put this card in Soul, draw 2, put 1 at the bottom of your deck. So, a lot of people, a lot of people will end up letting this hit, actually, because you're putting on so much pressure, especially on a grade 1 or 2 turn early game, so... it's also fun to clone it with Siegfried, because then you could make it even more, have even more pressure. The next, honestly, I go back and forth between this. 2 copies of Funky Bazooka. This card hasn't really been doing that much work for me. When your other rearguard is placed in the same column as this unit, it gains 5k, which is not bad.
I think that card's mostly designed for premium.
Yeah. In Standard, it just it doesn't really do much. I think I'd rather play the grade 0 on Flipper, but unfortunately, since I bought this deck off someone that didn't give me as an extra, I don't have that, so... I'm stuck running this card, which only rarely actually comes in use, but it's an okay option. Onto the grade 2s. 4 copies of Black Panther, and if you've, by the way, noticed in this deck, we play a lot of 4-ofs, just because Siegfried will often pull the same copy of the card from your soul, so you just want to run 4-ofs for your consistency. Black Panther's a cool card. When he attacks, you can Soul Blast 1, have him gain 5k or 15k. If he gains 15k, You put him at the soul at the end of the battle, so this card's just really good, I think, late game for just gaining that additional bit of power to go over the threshold that they have to guard. Early game, it can just be a big beat stick, and it's also a really good target, I think, to clone for Siegfried, as everything is in this deck, so...
just don't let Thanos snap, or else he disappears.
Yep. Next card we have is 4 copies of Hidespread Brackies. Simple card, when it's placed, gains 10k, and at the beginning of your main phase, you can put them into your soul, search for another Brackie, and call it to rear, so that Brackie will gain another 10k. When you clone it with Siegfried, this card can reach 30k on its own without a force marker, so this card is just basically a big beat stick that can recycle itself. Really the theme of the deck. I love it. Just make sure you have enough Brackies before you do your shenanigans.
It's a really fun card. Also a fun card to see again, because I was running that card in set 1, which... 4 copies of
one of my favorite grade 2s in the deck, Spike Bouncer. Card's super good. It's one of the few cards that actually is a +1 in this deck. When placed, you can counterblast 1, soul blast 1, and you can call this, or you look at the same cards as your Vanguard from the top of your deck and call one of them. So again, this is the only way you really get a +1 in this deck, actually, since Siegfried's a +0, Brackie's often a +0, Wonder Boy's a +0, Gyro Slinger's a +0. But a second skill after attacks, you can counterblast 1 and put it into your soul to draw a card. So this card is, again, just your advantage engine of this deck. It's super crucial for the early game. It's why this deck has a really good early rush. If you see this deck early game, you're probably going to do well. And then finally onto the grade 3s, we run 4 Juggernaut Maximum. So just like Brackie, it gains 10k when it's placed, and just like Brackie and Wonder Boy, you can put it into your soul at the beginning of the main phase, search for another copy of it. So again, just a way to fill to your deck. This guy becomes a huge beat stick.
And just like Brackie, another card I was playing in set 1.
Yep, that dude's origin rare actually looks pretty good. It does give you the force marker, so if you have to ride it, it's not awful, and the support around Spike Brothers is good enough that you could play with this card as your Vanguard, but you kind of do lose a lot of that aggression and on-hit pressure if you don't have Siegfried.
If you do ride it, you sort of have to keep riding it.
Yeah, because otherwise it kind of just becomes vanilla. If you do ride it, I think I usually put the force marker on the Vanguard.
Because then you're swinging for 33. Which is
and finally, 4 copies of our boy General Seifreid, or Siegfried. I just like saying Siegfried. This is really the heart and soul of the deck. Counterblast 1, you can choose one of your rear guards and put into the soul, and then search for a copy of that card. Then that card and this card gains 10k. It's not once per turn, so you could use multiple counterblasts and just make Siegfried really big. The issue is, with this, the deck doesn't have a lot of consistent countercharging options. You do have the grade 0, which I actually might be running if I can get hands on it, and you do have Commander Sigwald, but against Kagero, that dude's not going to survive till the beginning of your main phase because they can just blow him up. And he doesn't have a gift, so you do have to be careful with the counterblast management of this deck. But if you do use it, but he is not once per turn, so again, you can make him really big. And when he hits, doesn't even have to hit the Vanguard, it can just hit anything. You can Soul Blast 2, stand one of your rear guards, and retire one of your opponent's rear guards. So, just really good.
You'll find you end up guarding rear guards against this deck just because they point that at it.
Yeah, especially against Aquaforce. Like, as an Aquaforce player, I hate playing against Spike Brothers because they usually just have Siegfried aim for, like, Riptide or something like that, and usually end up guarding it anyways when I usually wouldn't, just because then it'll be a -2 to my board, since it'll just be able to retire something else. So just having that second effect in, like, Soul Blast 2 isn't even a problem for this deck, because you're literally putting everything into the soul. So, a lot of people just end up perfect guarding him, which is perfectly fine because he's doing his job. And if you do let him hit, well, you're likely taking crits since I'm filtering out through the deck, and, you know...
And you're getting a stand, and you're popping something. That's sort of the hell vice this deck puts you in, is you have to either guard the huge rear guards or the Vanguard, which is going to lead to a ton of advantage if it hits.
Yeah. So, usually you just end up having your big rear guards, and you have maybe Siegfried swinging for like 23k after using its skill once. And they're usually in the position where they're just like, I have to take these rear guards, and then just use everything to make Siegfried a no-pass, and then if I rip any crits anyways, they're going to go into a rear guard that might be swinging for like 60 to 70k. So, Spike Brothers definitely does put you in a bad spot, especially if you're in Excel Clan, that already doesn't generate a lot of advantage. So, that's basically the deck profile.
What are your good and bad matchups?
Good matchups, Aquaforce, Nova Grappler, Tachikaze, just because we're an Excel Clan that can just sort of attack their rear guards at will. Huge numbers are very difficult for them to guard. Tachikaze is a little bit less since they can plus pretty well, but even then, they kind of have a little bit of a difficult time sustaining that advantage. Neutral matchups are obviously the other Force clans, although this can do very well against them since they hit pretty big numbers that can trouble Deep Police a little bit. Royals, like I said, they might not plus as much as Royals, but they do hit much better numbers, so this deck is very good offensively against them. Bad matchups, Mega Colony's kind of iffy. Protect markers do hurt, but since a lot of your stuff does recycle itself into the slow, you don't really care about the -5, which is helpful, and you usually reach such big numbers anyways that you don't even care. But Grand Blue and OTT are very difficult just because they can literally just tank the deck until they just run you out of resources or hand. So, overall, it's a pretty decent deck. Solid tier 2. I think it did win the London BCS, actually, which was surprising. So you could certainly take this deck and have a fun time at a regional. So, you know, fun stuff.
Any parting thoughts?
Football players can really hurt each other badly, and this deck personifies that.
Especially when you are encouraged to use weapons.
But that's really it. Like, comment, and subscribe. We'll have a lot more deck profiles, set
Remember,
reviews.
don't bring any weapons to your football games.
Yes, and you will get kicked out.